right, welcome back. So we're going to start in on the creation of this API. Obviously, JSON APIs you can make without endpoints, right? So we, in some prior units, rolled our own. So we sent up JSON messages, we sent back JSON messages. It's easy. Turns out that there's a lot of things that you kind of do the same every time. And whenever you start doing the same thing every time, and there's little ways you can make it better, you're just asking for a framework right there. So endpoints really is just that framework that just organizes how you make your own API. And it's kind of like doing it the right way, to be honest. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new file. It's called api.py. You could name it anything you wanted. It turns out that we've already kind of used the name api.py though in our app.yaml, if you remember where it was. So I just said new file. It's going into my MQ endpoints. It's called api.py. The way that I chose to do it was to say new file. There I had to type the .py. If I'd said new module, I wouldn't have had to type the .py, but it just doesn't matter. I kind of made reference to where we'd used this before. It was actually right there. So we said API, which is the module name, the file name, and then we said .app. So that's something we're going to make inside this file real soon. What we're going to do to make our lives easier is we're going to copy in some code and then talk about it. I always have mixed feelings about copy pasting large chunks of code because it's easy to just like not even know what you're doing and just paste it in. But we'll try to talk about it as we go. So let's look at this, what we kind of typed in so far. So this is a bare bones basics API. Well, it's not even finished yet. But what it is it's a class, right? So it's a MovieQuote API. First and foremost, it's a class. It extends remote.service. So that's what makes it an Endpoints API. And then it's got this annotation above it. Annotations are just becoming increasingly popular with code. They're metadata that tell like the tool information about this class. Very useful thing. The way it works is you say at endpoints and then you say .api. That's what begins this annotation. The annotation has a name, obviously, which is MovieQuotes. You'll see this name appear like in the API Explorer. You'll also see it in the path for whenever you make these JSON API calls. The version, so it needs a version number. This is good if you're like having multiple versions as you roll out a real product. And then a description, which is an optional thing, but it'll show up in the API Explorer. At present, it just says pass because we haven't made any methods. I'm going to go ahead and delete the word pass, though, just so I don't forget to delete it later, because we're going to put real methods in here. And then this line, which is now marked as an error because I deleted the word pass, this is my actual like instance of this thing, right? All right, so let's go ahead and start looking for some methods to put into this guy. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in our first method. So we're going to bring in insert method. So here's the insert method. So I'm just going to pop it in there. The insert method has a dependency on this parent key variable. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this parent key variable and paste it up here. And then if your auto importer is working happy-go-lucky, you should be able to Command-Shift-O. NDB is around twice, right? So there's one that's like inside the Endpoints Proto data store. I predict that you could use either one, but this one is just a plain old key. So I'm going to use the plain old Google App Engine external for that NDB. I predict either would work, but I'm just going to use the plain old one. All right, so let's focus on the new part here. So the new part here is this method. So this is my MovieQuote method. So some things to notice is about this annotation first. So it says at MovieQuote.method. This is an Endpoints Proto data store trick. So MovieQuote is an endpoints model, which is both a data store model schema and it's also a JSON message schema. In this case, it's kind of telling you about, hey, the JSON message MovieQuote, we're going to make a method on it. There's a thing called method and a thing called query method. We'll see query method later. But the nice thing about method is a MovieQuote comes in and a MovieQuote goes out. And that pattern, it's kind of too simple for really complex things, but that pattern is really powerful. Just that you're going to get in a thing that needs to be a JSON formatted MovieQuote. So they're going to convert it into a MovieQuote, like the model object MovieQuote. And then whenever you return from your method, you need to give a movie quote out, and it'll take care of everything under the hood. So the nice thing is you only have to worry about like the high level, like movie quotes, model object stuff, and it'll take care of all the low level stuff. And so let's look through the rest of this annotation. The first is the path. The path can be whatever you want. I have a naming convention that I like to follow where I say like a repeat of what object it is. So this is a movie quote path method. So it's a movie quote slash something. This is going to be used for both create and update. And so we combine those to the word insert. That's a pretty common thing we've seen many times. So that's going to be actually like the URL that's used as a movie quote slash insert. The next thing is the name of this method. The name is important when you generate client code. That's for iOS, Android, or even the web client code. And so whenever they generate client code, this is going to be the name of this method. Again, it's nice to have a naming system, so I do movie quote, and here it's a dot insert because methods need a dot. There's also a field for HTTP method. The default is post, but I kind of like to say the default. That way it just kind of like makes my code more readable. It's like, hey, this is a post. All right, and then the method itself needs a name. Interestingly, the name of the function is meaningless. The annotation is what's important, but I just went in and called it movie quote underscore insert. So very easy to follow naming system there. What comes in here is a request. So this request is the JSON message that got sent up. Under the hood, this got converted from JSON into a movie quote object. So you only have to worry about the movie quote object. Interestingly enough, it is a movie quote object, so we could have actually just done this. We could have just said request.put. This would work. It would actually put it to the data store. The thing that it doesn't do, though, is it doesn't have a parent on it. So whenever it does this thing under the hood, it doesn't like put it into the tree hierarchy properly. So we do not do that. Instead, what we do is kind of funny. We make a whole new movie quote with the appropriate parentage, right? And then we just steal from the request its quote, and they steal from the request the movie, and then we use that to make a new one. So it's kind of like a cheapo clone method, right? We put that into the data store, and then we also return it. The only reason we return it is that if you want to do something when you just did like an insert, you can actually add it to your page right now. So this is a JSON API, and so we can save it. Now what we really want to do is we want to test it. So in order to test it, I mean, obviously you could make a web client, but I mean, that would be a lot of work. So in order to make things easier to test, they've made an API Explorer. The URL that you need to go to is shown here. So it's _AH/API. It's a little bit interesting that in app.yaml, you say SPI here. Not a typo. Here you type SPI, and then over here you type API. It's just how it works, right? So you go to the AH API Explorer. Once you deploy, it's going to be the same thing. You'll just replace this localhost 8080 with whatever your deployed one is, right? So you go visit the API Explorer. Little gotcha here with the API Explorer. Localhost can only use HTTP. There are things in the Explorer that need to use HTTPS. Easy fix. There's just a little like security warning here. You just say load unsafe scripts. You can read the message if you want, but it all works out. Now you can see that once I've loaded those unsafe scripts, I've got my MovieQuotes API. You can see my version number shows up here. This is my name of my API, and then they just append the word API. And then this is my description. If I click on it, it'll show me all the methods that I've got. Right now I've only got one method. I've got insert. Insert is currently behaving as create, but that's all right. We'll make it actually be an insert here in a little bit. So I go ahead and click on insert. And now I can actually try. So this is my first endpoints movie, and then I'll just say go endpoints, right? It doesn't really matter what I say. Usually the API Explorer is used with authenticated requests because web apps typically you have to sign in to make them useful. MovieQuotes is intentionally chosen to be global, so everybody shares the same data. So we can actually execute this one without OAuth. So it's funny that this is like the big button, and then execute without OAuth is just kind of like this little ugly link. So I clicked it there, and so you can see that it did a post request. I love the information that it shows you here. It went to localhost 8080 _ API. It went to the MovieQuotes path because that's the name of my API, version 1, and then the stuff I typed was MovieQuote/insert. So you can see that's what got used as the URL. The body of this post had a movie and a quote, and then what came back was a movie and a quote, so similar to the same ones I sent up. And then it's also got an entity key. Now that entity key is present because we added it to the message field schema. Otherwise, it would not have been present. And then last touch date time, which admittedly we could take off because we're not using it. So this got loaded up via the API Explorer, and it's actually saved to the back end. So if I hit refresh, you can see that it's actually present there as well. Interesting side notes. The only reason we did this whole parent key thing was purely so that we could work well with the existing Forms plus Jinja version. If you remember this whole parent key thing, that was to get strong consistency so that like whenever you did a submit and then an immediate get after it would be on there. We could actually get away without it with endpoints because things happen a little differently. But we're still putting it on there and it's fine. There's no real problem with it. Great. So we just implemented create. We tested on the API Explorer and we saw that it's here in localhost. I think that's good enough for this video. Come back next time and we'll knock out some more of these methods. See you then. Bye.